Hello and welcome to another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Fetici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
It's good to see you again. Hello, friend.
Good to see you again. Hello. We should say up front that obviously App Stories is now both audio and video.
Yes.
We got some lovely comments from people who appreciate there's a video version now. We got some comments from people saying that they dislike the fact that there's a video version because some context gets lost. And that is useful feedback, actually. And obviously, we are going to try and keep the best possible balance that we can between, continuing an audio-only program and also offering a video version. So we will try our best. If there's a moment, for example, right now, John just waved at me. So that's the context that you may have lost. It's not a huge deal. I mean, it's John waving at me.
I did still say hello, so that's the context
hello.
for the audio.
So that's we're gonna try our best, and we're gonna try and keep the two versions as true to themselves as best as we can. So
Yes.
We have a special guest today here. It's our very own Club µStories Discord community manager, watchOS reviewer, starting with watchOS 11 this year, Jonathan Reed. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Hello. I will not wave.
Hi.
I will not
Yeah,
wave.
it's not waving.
I'm not waving.
It's not waving.
I'm waving. I'm waving
not waving.
internally through the microphone with my voice to all the audio listeners. Hello to you all. Great to be here.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. We are continuing this series of interviews on App Stories, where John and I, we've been doing this for how many years? Since 2016 or something, 2016,
2017. Spring of 2017, teaching.
As with any relationship, every once in a while you gotta bring in a third.
Okay. You're making
Right.
You're making.
All right.
No,
I'm now leaving the call.
Where's this going?
No.
This is a spicy show. This is a spicy episode.
No, but every once in a while you gotta spice it up. So
Yes.
And we wanna, on a more serious note, we wanted to put the spotlight on the other people that are helping us make Mac Stories a better place, a more special place. And Jonathan has been playing an essential role in the past year. Now I believe it's been a year. I think.
Over year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, managing the excellent Club µStories Discord for Club µStories Plus and Premier members. It's a whole lovely bunch of people, and Jonathan does an excellent work collecting every single week the things that people are discussing, highlighting those things and those conversations in the µStories weekly newsletter. So if you see those links, that's all Jonathan's work. And Jonathan also debuted this year as our new resident watchOS reviewer. So that was a fun job. I mean, it was fun for me to read it. I don't know if it was fun for you. I hope it was fun for you.
It was fun, yes. It was.
Cool.
It's a big year. It was a big year to actually dive into that because there were a lot more changes than I think met the eye. Like, we all left WWDC thinking about Apple Intelligence and things like that. But the reality was watchOS had some of the most practical and interesting changes of all.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. It's been a great year. I'm excited for next year to get back into it again, and I honestly think they're going to keep on ramping up some of these changes. I think some of the changes this year that got introduced are just a sign of some of the things to come, especially the tracking sleep and so forth. But I'm excited for next year for sure.
Yeah. That's a good point because we definitely saw that with things like the check-in feature, which originally was like an iPhone only thing, and then that was brought to the watch this year. There's always things like that get spread out across different platforms a little more widely than maybe they initially were. When you see something and it's a good feature and you think this is really good, but I wish it was on this, or I wish it did this other thing. That's usually a pretty good sign that maybe Apple is probably thinking along those lines too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that is also where I wanted to start. It's been about a month and a half since watchOS 11, and I kind of wanted to check in with you how things are going. Sort of like a post-review watchOS 11 check-in. What are the features that you find yourself using on a daily basis now that the review is done, that all the software updates are out? Apple Intelligence is, of course, becoming the conversation on the iOS, iPadOS, and macOS side. How do you think it's going with watchOS 11 so far?
It's great. I've been really enjoying Training Load. I've been trying to up my fitness, and I think Training Load is kind of a good motivator. I think there's maybe some more refinement they could do in that area, but in terms of looking at my progress every day is trying to improve my fitness and get stronger and fitter and so forth. It's a good tool for that, and I think that if you're not using it and you're going on a fitness journey, I think it's a really good thing to try out. Pausing activity rings is great, and setting different levels for each day is also good, because sometimes we just don't do things on a day. We have a Sunday where we put our feet up all day, and looking at those activity rings, I don't know, kind of puts that pressure on you, thinking that maybe I should be out doing something today, and it takes that pressure off you. So I think that's a really important feature, which was a long time coming, but I'm glad it's here now, and they've done a really good job implementing it. The sleep features, the Vitals app is very good. I don't find myself using that as much, because I'm more relying on an app called Athletic, which has sort of more pro features, which I recommend listeners check out, because it taps into things like heart rate variability, and it tracks your sleep debt and things like that, and it gives you a lot more granular look into these sorts of things. So I think those are the main ones. Another one which I think which will feed into what we're going to talk about in a bit, I think, is the double tap, which I know that came in the last year for watchOS, but I didn't upgrade my phone, my watch, so I've only got it this year. And this year they allowed the double tap API, which allowed developers to tap into that, pardon the pun, to tap into that double tap feature. And some of the best apps, just it's great to just double tap with them, and scroll or add log an activity, or even answering notifications is great. So I think that sort of feature is a really nice addition for developers, and I'd like to see them expand that. Maybe triple taps or even single taps. I don't quite know how it works internally within the watch, but I'd like to see them sort of dive into that a bit more, because it is very useful, and I use it quite a lot. How about you guys with watchOS 11?
I think I'm really digging the fact that like live activities and widgets now show up in a more prominent place. And it's been very natural, that sort of interaction. Like, it's not something that I think about, but when I look down at my watch and I see a live activity or I see a widget there, like, it's sort of the system doing this automatically, and that's been working really well for me so far. I actually tried to upgrade to a Series 10 when it came out in September, but eventually I went back to the Ultra. I still have the Ultra One. I gave my Series 10 to Sylvia, and she's using the Series 10. Sylvia is a very particular type of Apple user. I'm understanding now. Like, she's very particular. Like, for example, she has the Series 10. She doesn't care at all about like the speaker, for example, now being a built-in thing. And right now we have this struggle with Sylvia where she's still using the AirPods 2. So these are not AirPods Pro, the second generation regular AirPods from many years ago. She tried my AirPods 4 this week, and she thought she was going to use them. And today Sylvia is a dance teacher, and she needs to create these choreographies for her dance classes. And today she was rehearsing at home and choreographing at home, and one of the AirPods fell out of her ears. And so there's something about the shape of the AirPods 4 that still doesn't work with Sylvia. And so she's most likely, so right now we're facing this dilemma, like, are you going to be using the AirPods 2 really until they die? And they're starting to give out, like the battery is starting to give out.
Oh yeah, I'm amazed that they work at all. I mean, those are not new at all.
Yeah, she has no idea what she's going to use, because those AirPods are eventually going to give up for good. So yeah, and she's using the Series 10. I'm back on the Ultra. I love my Ultra, even though the battery life is not what it used to be when I got it almost 2 years ago. But I love it so much. And now with the widgets and the live activities, I feel like I'm using the watch a lot more. And yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, I'm finding the same thing with the widgets and the live activities. They've been really nice to have. The other thing I do use is occasionally I'll use the check-ins on the watch when I'm going out for a run or something by myself, and like maybe my wife's at work, and that way she kind of knows that I'm away from the house, and I'm expected to be home probably in half an hour or whatever it is. That's just that way there's somebody who knows where I am, and I might be out, on a trail or something out in the woods, and that way at least one person in the world knows that I'm out in the woods and not being eaten by a bear, hopefully.
Yeah.
Federico and I like to talk about bears.
That's a different show.
It's a different show.
And so go listen to Unwind if you want to hear all about the wildlife. Jonathan, what was the Apple Watch app that you wanted to mention with the double tap?
So this was, I thought, let's talk about an app category that I think never gets talked about. So Apple Watch narrows it down a lot in app categories.
Yes.
But this is also a web browser for the Apple Watch. It's called, it's actually pronounced µBrowser. So it's I believe it's the Greek letter.
Yeah.
It's like a U, but with the descender just at the beginning. And what that means is micro, I believe. And this is essentially a web browser for your Apple Watch. Now, you could previously access the web from your Apple Watch using, I believe, something called it was like a glance feature, I believe. And there was a weird way of going about it. You had to click on links in an email, for example, to access a website. But I think a couple of years ago, Apple introduced WebKit in watchOS and allowed you to effectively browse the web. Now, there's several restrictions to that, like you can't save cookies, for example, which does make it a completely private browser, but it does mean you're clicking on those European, notifications to decline or accept cookies. But what I'm finding is a really interesting use case is I'm kind of using it in a similar way that I'm using Teachy tabs. So you've got your 6 or 7, or in my case, I have 8. Right. I don't know if that's allowed, but I've got 8 Teachy tabs.
I'll allow it.
Okay, good. Okay, that's good to get your approval on that.
Yeah.
And I'm using it to sort of browse sites like The Verge, Mac Stories, because I browse Mac Stories, believe it or not. Even though we work for Mac Stories, I read all your lots of your articles at the same time as other users do. So it's something where I might be just in a situation where I don't want to get my phone out of my pocket. I just want to have a look at okay, what's going on The Verge? Is there some interesting tech stories that I might want to check in with later on? And I can open the app. And µBrowser also supports the double tap API, which we just mentioned. And it allows me to just have my one arm out. Instead of scrolling with the digital crown, I can just double tap and it will scroll periodically down the site. And I've just found this to be like a really interesting way to browse some of my favorite sites and just keep up with things without having to dive into Safari on my phone or open my computer and then maybe get distracted by something else. And also sometimes I don't have my phone on me and I just want to, I don't know, I'm just sat bored, waiting in a waiting room or something. Or sometimes I've done it when I've been waiting for my daughter to go off to sleep and I'm sat in the corner of the room and I don't want to get my phone out and shine a big light. So I'll just have a little browse of various websites while she's doing that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it has a companion app as well on iOS, so you can manage your favorite bookmarks as well. There's a couple of other apps out there that do a similar thing, but they're not as full-featured and they don't really fill the screen, and you also can't manage bookmarks as well. So this is certainly the best one by far. And yeah, that's it. It's an interesting app, and I definitely recommend users try it out. It's a fun little one to try.
Nice. Yeah, I have used this before myself once or twice, and it never really stuck with me. I think it would help if I spent more time in the iOS app and managed the bookmarks up front and do it that way. I know, Federico, did you use this mostly to see if something had been posted yet on Mac Stories or something like that?
I did use it for that exact reason. Yeah. I set up I set up the bookmarks on the phone, and then I found those on the Apple Watch, and that's I think I still have it installed actually. I think it's a good idea. I'm surprised that there's like no Safari Nano, Safari Micro for the Apple Watch for that exact purpose. Like just a quick check of your 6 or 7 favorite websites, for example. Or maybe I should be waiting for an Apple Watch version of Teachy Tabs. But yeah, it's a lovely little Apple Watch app. Great idea. I think the developer has done a great job, sort of condensing the features down to what makes sense to have on the wrist. That being said, Jonathan, it's time for our quiz. In the sense that all the guests that we're having on App Stories lately, we like to do a little friendly interrogation, so to speak. We want to know how you use your computers, and we want to know what's your workflow looking like. And I will start with everybody's favorite, RSS. Do you use RSS? How do you use it? If not, how? Tell me more. Like, how do you read the news?
I use Reader. I think I've used Reader for like 4 or 5 years, maybe. It's been a long one, and I've never really felt the urge to move away from it. It does kind of what I want. It surfaces the news that I want from the sites that I read. It's easy to sort through, mark as read, and so forth. I don't really feel the need to have anything more than that, so I've never really had the urge to try other apps, although I'm sure other apps would maybe offer more to me. It does what I kind of want to do. That kind of works for me. I also sort of have recently, with a read later service, I've been using Omnivore. And I believe just like our friend Matt Birchler has moved all his read later setup over to Omnivore. I did this also a couple of months ago, and now Omnivore have just been bought by 11 Labs, and
it's shutting down.
Yeah, and they're shutting down. Which so Omnivore were using 11 Labs as text to speech AI tools and producing really, really good text to speech. And the way why I really liked it is because I could have this as a read letter app, but also as a sort of semi podcast app. So if I was stacked up with a bunch of articles that I wanted to get through, and I'm a very slow reader, so I could just pop these on almost as a podcast, and that was helping me a lot keep up with some of the articles that I wanted to read, like some of the newsletters like Platformer, for example, where there's long form writing, and sometimes I was getting behind with these, and it would keep me up with these by letting me listen to them. So I'm really hoping that 11 Labs take sort of these RSS features from Omnivore and the ability to send an email into the device over to 11 Labs. But I guess we'll see what happens with that.
There's a couple of things I want to unpack here. So for Reader, you're using the classic Reader.
Yes.
You're not using the fancy new one. What's your take on the new one with the timeline approach?
Yeah, I tried it early on in the beta and then a bit later on, and it just doesn't really fit with my. I think maybe it's a completist type thing. I like to know that I've seen everything that I want to see, and the kind of unreliability of maybe seeing everything within that. I'm sure it works really well for some people, and I think it's good that he's taken a different approach with this, gives something different for people to try out, but it just doesn't really work with me in the same way. I think it doesn't work for some other people in exactly the same way, but then it probably conversely will work with other people. So I think that's it just never really worked for me.
And for the read later, with Omnivore shutting down, have you considered, Readwise Reader, for example? It's got similar features, like you can have your newsletters delivered. You can read the text, but also you can listen to the text being spoken aloud, even though the voices are not as good as the 11 Labs voices that Omnivore was using. Like, have you considered that as an alternative?
Yeah, I wrote about it previously on Mac Stories Weekly about I was choosing between Omnivore and Readwise Reader, and ultimately the choice was made by the quality of the voices on Omnivore. So I probably will try Readwise Read later and see how I get on with that. But I'm kind of hoping that 11 Labs move pretty quickly to put all the Omnivore features within that app, which you can also Because you can also copy and paste. You can add links into the 11 Labs app. You can send PDFs into the app. You can copy and paste text into it. So there's not a proper workflow for getting it in, but you can get these things in. So I wonder if it's not going to take too long before they do that. But it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, well, that is a problem with a lot of these kind of apps because they're not really native apps to begin with. They're kind of drawing on the web, I think. And I've been on the 11 Labs beta since the early days, and boy, it was a super rough app at the beginning. It's come a long way very, very quickly. The thing that 11 Labs has is the voices. They really are quite good. They've done a great job with the AI training for those voices. And I'd love to be able to see, shortcuts integration, things to make it easy. For instance, I could see a scenario where you use something like Good Links, and just instead of sending the links into 11 Labs, you could actually send the text in because that would be cleaned up and very easy to listen to. But I don't think you can do that. You could copy it out of Good Links and then paste it in manually, which isn't too much of a hassle, but it'd be nice if there was more of an end-to-end workflow there. Another app for Read Later that is actually starting to change again is Instapaper. They just got tagging support on Instapaper this week.
Wow.
And
that's a nostalgia trip. We were talking about my old iMac on the pre-show, and this is kind of almost going back as far.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't even remember who owns Instapaper now, honestly.
It's the people who originally bought it from Marco, I think.
Then
the individuals
sold it
who
to
were working
Pinterest.
at BetaWorks at one point.
And then bought it back again, I think.
Yeah, because then it went to Pinterest,
Yeah. The next category, Jonathan, is a very easy one. Very easy one. What do you use as a task manager?
I don't use a task manager. No, I'm only joking.
Oh
I'm
my
only
gosh.
I'm only
Another one.
joking.
Oh my God, another one. Okay.
I'm only joking. Honestly, I don't know. I almost fell off my chair.
You got me for a second.
Fell off my chair when Nilly Ann we had that last week. No, I use reminders. I'm quite I'm quite straightforward with my task management needs. So I use reminders, and I have like a personal list and a family list, which I share with my wife, and then I have a Mac Stories one as well. And I've sort of got a couple of smart lists within that sort of combines some of the lists for due today or coming up this week, and that sorts that all out. So it's pretty straightforward. I use Remind Me Faster? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Which I have on my on my lock screen of my iPhone, which it's just such a good app. I love it. Just the quick input of just tapping once on the lock screen, typing it in, and then closing my phone is brilliant. I think it's one of the best apps that I have on my iPhone for sure. It's so good. Yeah. But I do use, and I also use Due for some like super important stuff like recurring tests like flea treatment for the cats and like watering the plants, things like that I really need to get done, quickly. So that's what I use for that. So I'm quite simplistic with task management.
Yeah, I love it. Go reminders. John, are you back on reminders now?
I am
Nice.
fully on reminders.
We're all using reminders.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Rob was trying to convince me to try Godspeed, which is
I've seen that.
It's kind of a Mac first task manager.
Yeah, it's keyboard driven task manager.
Keyboard driven. Yeah, you can even set it up in a way with a setting that makes it impossible to use the pointer with it, which I think is like a little bit of a bridge too far for me. But the difficulty I had with it when I last tried it a few months ago was that the iOS and iPadOS apps were not nearly up to par compared to the Mac. And, I guess I get it. And I could maybe live with that because I do most of my task management on my Mac. On the other hand, I'm kind of living in that world with Mail right now where I have different apps for different platforms, and I just don't like it. I try to avoid doing that as much as possible.
Yeah. And finally, Jonathan, in addition to managing the Discord community, you also write for Mac Stories and for Club Mac Stories. And obviously, I gotta ask you, what's your favorite app for writing?
I use Ulysses.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
You surprised?
I haven't used it. Because I don't know. I was really into Ulysses years
Yeah, we
ago.
both were into it for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, I was really into it. I had a whole thing with templates, with shortcuts actions. I had a custom theme. I was using custom fonts. Like it was a whole thing. I loved Ulysses. And then when Obsidian came out, I just, changed my life. But I want to know more. Like what's Ulysses like in 24?
It's good. I mean, you hit on a couple of things that I like about it, really, which is the custom fonts and shortcuts actions. They've just done a new release with even more shortcuts actions, which I'm going to have to try and dig into. So they're still on it with the app, and really pushing some of the development on it, which is really nice to see. And yeah, I have like shortcuts set up for creating. Creating the new weekly column or the community spotlight that just like opens up a template and then I can fill the bits in, which is really good. It also, just the way, as well as having custom fonts, which, as a graphic designer, is kind of like, I like to really customize visual looks. It has this way of, working within a document where it's kind of more visual rather than just being straight markdown, where it's just text.
Right.
If you insert an image, it will do you a small preview of that image. If you do a link, it's actually just puts a little box around the text you have, and then you double click on it to see what the link is. And I know that doesn't work for some people, and that's fine. But for me, I kind of like having just the text and the images and focusing on that. And then, when I export the markdown, I can check that if I like. And it just kind of works a bit better with the way I work as well. So that's kind of really why it's kind of the visual look of it that I like. And I just used it for a few years now. So it's just, sometimes it's just, I don't like to maybe as much as some people just try and switch for, to find out what's the hot new thing. I'm happy with it. So I'm just sticking with it for the minute. Yeah.
I think the couple of things that I always liked Ulysses. I still think it's one of the best text editors out there. I think that the things for me that I didn't like were that it doesn't allow you to access your files.
I think you can now.
Oh, really? Has that changed?
Yeah, I think last year they added a feature.
Good.
They added a feature, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, similar to IA Writer, where you can point Ulysses to
add a folder.
To add a folder. And I think you can like basically create a bookmark to that folder and say, get all my documents from here. Yeah. I think they added that, and you can pin it to the sidebar. So yeah, that was the issue, John, a few years ago when we were using it, like you were stuck inside Ulysses. But I think now you can potentially do something like point it at your Obsidian folder and like have Ulysses be like a nicer front end for just focused writing. And then when you want to edit and use all of your plugins and all of your macros and all that sort of stuff, switch back to Obsidian, and you shouldn't run into a file conflict nightmare, in theory.
That's interesting. I'll probably have to look at that, because I know we're, with the AppStories team, we're looking at some of our workflows within, and it might involve Obsidian. So, or that might help with using Obsidian. So I think that would be really good for integrating with Obsidian. So I'll definitely have to have a look at that and see how that works. I knew it was available. I've never really used it. I just sort of used the documents within the Ulysses app, really. I'm happy with it like that.
Yeah, and the file access feature on iOS, on iPadOS, used to be really flaky years ago when Apple introduced it. This is actually a very old feature. It used to be called file and folder bookmarks. I don't know if there's like a proper term for it now. If you recall, John, I was using this stuff with remember Scriptable by Simon Stovring? And years ago I was doing like this JavaScript scripts that were accessing files from a folder. That technology goes way back. I think it's become a lot more reliable in recent years. So like even if you reboot your device, for example, that link between a folder and an application like Ulysses, it will stay active. It used to be that when Apple introduced it, like you created a bookmark to a folder and then you rebooted your device and suddenly that bookmark was not working anymore. So that was not convenient.
Yeah,
and
I think that's
similar.
the same.
It's the same tech. I know what you're gonna say, John. It's the same technique that working copy. uses, for example, when you want to, for example, access your Obsidian vault in working copy, you create basically a linked folder in working copy. That's exactly the same tech.
Yeah, and that's how working copy works with Tailscale now too. I mean, that's one thing that I mentioned briefly in my story for the club was that you can use working copy and you can also use secure shellfish, which is also by Anders, to access the terminal via Tailscale on your iOS devices, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, this is a really nice collection of apps. Reminders, Reader, Ulysses, and sadly, Omnivore, which that will soon be replaced by
You have to get something new, I guess. Well, and of course the browser too. So
the browser
browsing on your wrist. How about it?
Give it a go. Give it a go. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, I think that about does it, John.
I think it does. All right, Jonathan, thank you for joining us this week on App Stories. Where can people find you online?
You can find me at Jonathan Reed, at techhub.social. I have to think about that every time.
All right. I know. Well, and you can find him on Mac Stories and Club Mac Stories, of course.
You can find him on Discord, where he manages the Discord. That's what it does.
It's very minimal. I would say, shout out to the people on Discord. It's minimal because there is so many nice people on that. There's not a bad egg. I thought, I'm going to have to be banning people when I sort of started being the manager, but I haven't had to ban anyone. It's been great.
No, we've never banned anybody. I was going to say you have the cushiest job of all.
There was one time.
Oh, was there?
A few years ago, but was one time. It's surprisingly a well-functioning democracy.
It is.
One of the best in the world, it turns out.
The internet could learn a lot from our Discord, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Jonathan.
Great to be here.
And of course, you can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net too. Federico and I are on Mastodon. Federico can be found at fetici.macstories.net, and I can be found at johnvorhees.macstories.net. And we are on Threads and Instagram. Federico is at Fetici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you later, guys.
Wow. That hits differently when you can see you spelling that out, John.
Bye, John.
Bye.